Oh, yes.
All right. Is it okay if I share my screen now?
Yes.
Cool.
Amy, I don't have the power to activate the transcript.
I can use the transcript on my Google Slides if that's okay.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Perfect. I kind of like that one a little bit more because it's slightly more accurate. But hey, everybody, I'm Devon Waugh. This session is called Learning Across Consortia, Expanding Access to Free Professional Development for Library Workers. Before we get into the content of the session, I just want to introduce myself. So you may be familiar with me. I'm the instruction librarian at NC Live. I've been there since 2019, and I'm currently reading The Brothers Karamazov, working from home right now. And like many of you, I adopted a dog last year, and this is Ted Danson, the dog. He's mostly called Ted. And what I want us to all do is kind of think back to March of last year. So grocery store shelves were getting emptied out. Most of us were told to go home and work from home without any indication of when we'd return back into the office. Many of us are still working from home, like myself. And I remember my last few days of working in person were spent writing as many webinar scripts on NC Live resources as I could come up with, emailing our vendor trainers to schedule as many webinars on our resources as we could, and trying to quickly flip a lot of our in-person events that were scheduled for the spring into online sessions. And so I feel like I kind of scrambled a lot in that time period. And what we were able to accomplish was absolutely exceeded our expectations. So in March, mid-March to the end of April, we held 42 different webinars, and we had 1,176 attendees at those sessions, which was nearly three times the amount of our attendance for the entire 2019 training program. And so what this got me thinking was there's this huge interest in professional development that may not necessarily be sustainable for me to carry out on an individual level, but I felt like there were other library consortia around the country who were probably in a similar position as myself. And so in taking kind of a bird's eye view at what was happening, I started kind of forming different connections across consortia. But before I explain the Professional Development Alliance and what that is, I do have a quick question for the chat. Have any of you attended an NC Live event in the last year? And if so, which ones? So we launched a speaker series last year. We've hosted a bunch of panels and COVID forums. And I'm just curious if there's anyone among you who's attended a session. All right. Well, feel free to submit a chat and let me know. I'm just kind of curious to see. And now looking kind of at a bird's eye view at what was happening, I realized that there were a lot of things that weren't just people being stuck at home that led to this interest in professional development. One of the first things that I realized in leading these sessions was that people were looking for a community, being outside of their libraries, being outside of their typical office spaces. People wanted to connect, catalogers with other catalogers, instruction librarians with other instruction librarians, library directors with other library directors, or vice versa, and even kind of across different levels of management. And so with this move to working from home, I also noticed that people felt like they had more of a flexibility to fit in things like an online conference or a webinar are participating in a panel, because you're not tethered to travel or cost, really. And you can just do it from the comfort of your home. Another thing that I noticed was that people were looking for different ways to shift positions. Many librarians were kind of switching between different careers. We had a huge interest in our professional development in the fall from new library workers to the state of North Carolina. And so those were kind of the main factors that I saw that were driving our interest. And here's another question for the chat. So what are some other factors that have driven you to attend professional development in the last year? You're welcome to respond in the chat or just kind of think through why you've decided to do that on your own. And so now that kind of takes me to talking about what the Professional Development Alliance is. So I reached out to other members of ICULC, which is an international group of library consortia that NC Live's a part of. And we met in June to talk about what we were doing for our member libraries and how to respond to the sudden interest in professional development. And after a few meetings, we realized that we wanted to share our offerings across consortia for free. We didn't want to pay for facilitators necessarily, because a lot of us are not operating on massive budgets. Often some of these consortia don't even have a dedicated training program or an instruction librarian, depending on their size and how many member libraries they're serving. And so we realized just the quickest way to be able to do that was just to share our Zoom links across a spreadsheet. And so we have 8 library consortia right now who are participating in this group, and we're looking to expand as well. So with that, the benefits were really immediate, and just putting together a simple Google Sheet and sharing out our training offerings. So this is an example of what we do each month. We kind of just put in what our webinar information is, and we promote it the same way that we promote any of our other sessions. So typically each consortia puts one webinar a month into this spreadsheet to offer up, more if they'd like, fewer if they're feeling like they have, they don't have the bandwidth to host a session each month. And so it's really limited overhead that we're able to achieve this with. It's been nice to be able to kind of have this broader reach as well, getting librarians from California to attend our training, or from Massachusetts or upstate New York, and really being able to kind of have a broader community that we're reaching. And in doing so, we've been able to work as a collective. So if we are looking to host a training on Python or some sort of technical skill, we don't have to rely just on our own connections and our networks to be able to do that. We can kind of say, hey, this is a topic that we have in mind. Do you have somebody who might be interested in leading a session? And kind of working from there. And in just looking at the attendance this fall, we found we were able to sustain, hundreds of library workers around the country are attending our trainings. It may not be the 1,100 that I saw personally in March and April, but this is a really steady stream of interest that is manageable and requires very little effort on all of our parts. And so we really see this as a permanent fixture of our training programs moving forward. And I took a look at NC Live's participation in these sessions and found that attendees from NC Live member libraries make up 15% of the whole audience right now, which is pretty significant considering there are 7 other consortia that are a part of it. And so that's been really nice to see. And here are some of the topics covered. So, we've had sessions on virtual reality programming, Creative Commons, usability studies, data literacy, how to teach online. And we're able to cover so much more ground than just me operating individually, trying to represent the needs of North Carolina library workers. And so that's been really nice to see that breadth of programming. And with that national reach, so this is one of our upcoming sessions that ACERL is hosting on Black digital history, that's putting a spotlight on the Wilmington Massacre of 1898. This is reaching a national audience. It's taking things that are of regional importance in digital humanities and offering a much broader participation than we may have thought was possible if we worked in isolation from each other. And this is an example of a science librarianship panel that was hosted in January from the Boston Library Consortium. So hearing science librarians from Northeastern and UMass and Harvard talking about their roles and what they see as their involvement in sharing information in this time. And I do want to kind of point out a notable session. So we hosted one on decolonizing subject headings and collections in December. And we had 513, but I actually think it was closer to 530 people register for that session, and 324 people attended, which led it to break my Zoom account at certain points. This is the highest attendance that we've ever had for an NC Live webinar. I think it's more attendance than we've had for some of our annual conferences. And it's really led us to rethink how we're supporting different roles within the library. So I don't have a cataloging background, but now we've kind of developed this cataloging community of interest, and we're hosting a follow-up webinar at the end of March. And so it's been really amazing to see us recruit and host different events that are meeting a need, not only on a national scale, but actually on an international scale. We had some attendees from the UK as well. And this is just kind of the early feedback on the webinars. So people have been really appreciative of the quality of presenters. Since we're recruiting across 8 different consortia, we can find folks who are really experts in their fields or in their topics, and find people who are passionate about the work that they do, and just want to share it openly and freely, as we like to do typically as librarians. What's also been nice to see is we've hosted a lot of sessions on mindfulness and self-care, especially Carly, our Illinois consortium, who's part of the group. And people have been finding that it's not only helpful for their work and how they relate to their coworkers and working from home, but also just giving them hope during a really difficult time. So it's nice to see that professional development is just giving people that inspiration and hope and peace that they're looking for when things are feeling really chaotic and out of control right now. And people have also noted kind of the immediate relevance of the sessions that we're offering. So people have felt like some of the topics and projects that have been mentioned have really inspired them to think about how they advocate for resources or funding. During the decolonizing webinar that I mentioned, a lot of catalogers noted in our follow-up survey how they were so excited to hear how research librarians thought of the work that they do, and how it impacts them in the library. And so that's been really nice to see. And what has also been kind of a key piece of feedback is how many people have been so excited about the presenters and the topics that they are just ready to go out and learn more. So we give kind of a good introduction to certain topics. Some of them we do follow-up sessions to kind of expand on that initial session. And we found that people are really taking that knowledge and running with it, which is great. And here are some of the lessons that I've learned throughout the process. So Sharing data and feedback across 8 different consortia and 3 different time zones is a challenge. Everybody uses different tools, whether it's Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey or Zoom or GoToMeeting. And so we're all kind of trying to work with what we already do, our current workflows, but it can be a challenge sometimes to set expectations as a group when neither of us are each other's bosses. And this is an ongoing initiative without any sort of end date. And so that's something that I think I didn't necessarily anticipate would be so important in this group. And really what we realized is we can't just continue to operate from a Google spreadsheet. We need infrastructure to develop a sense of legitimacy as a group, recruit for more speakers, and also just promote what we're doing and extend that learning in the long term. And what I've found is every consortium is different. So some of them are servicing just academic libraries. We have one that is serving just theological libraries. One of our consortia also serves public libraries, so we kind of are able to share across our offerings easily. But it's been a challenge to kind of realize, is this topic going to fit a large audience? How can we market it in such a way that people realize that, you know, cataloging is for everybody? And so it's been nice to see kind of how we manage those challenges as a group. And I do want to share some of our plans for the future. So right now we're looking at creating a shared repository for our recordings, whether that's a YouTube or a Vimeo account we're kind of working out right now, so that people can readily access it on a known video hosting site. And another thing that we're doing is making a basic website so that we can have kind of a front door to what we're doing and also apply for grants and funding to really expand this group as we get more members. And another thing that we're doing is just kind of adding in social media into that so that we have more methods of promotion as a group, not just the existing ones that we have. And that's kind of what we're doing right now as an alliance. So now I have about 4 minutes left if anybody wants to ask me questions. I noticed that we have some submissions to the chat about factors that led to professional development. I see Donna shared need to learn more about DEI issues and solutions. And that's something that I have continued to hear in the last really year and a half as a key factor for professional development. And NC Live is right now in the process of developing a training series for June that brings together academic libraries as well as public libraries to talk about policies and programming and resources for carrying out DEI solutions in libraries. And Therese was sharing kind of new responsibilities. Yeah, as people are kind of moving up internally in their libraries or switching to new roles, working remotely. I definitely think that professional development can kind of meet that need.
Thank you so much, Devon.
Yeah, no problem.
Always great to hear you share what you are up to. Let's see. I think we can turn things over to James. If you would like to. I've got captioning set up for you, so you will not need to worry about that.
Wonderful. That was one of my questions. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, let me get my slide deck up. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is James Britt, and I'm the head of Access and Collection Services at the Goodson Law Library at Duke Law. I'm very jealous of Devon's introductory slide. I wish I had done something that creative. I think Ted Danson is a wonderful dog name, by the way, so that's wonderful. But I'm going to talk about our virtual circulation desk assistants that we launched during the pandemic. Kind of a brief agenda. I know it's a short session and it's the end of the day, but I'm going to try to go over the background and the idea creation, some of the technical research that we have that we put into it, how we staff it, how we implement it, and then the results and kind of our pros, cons, and lessons learned. So to start, as with every other library, we had some pretty dramatic changes in our service due to the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, our library was open 24/7, 365 for our community members. So students and faculty of the law school could come to the library whenever they wanted. However, we would only staff our circulation desk about 6 to 12 hours a day, depending on the time of year and the day of the week. So we had 4 full-time staff members, 2 interns, and many student employees staffing that circulation desk for those hours. And our circulation desk provided a number of different services, including circulating books. We had open stacks, as in most libraries, so patrons could just go pick up whatever book they wanted and come to the circulation desk and we would check it out. We also had a self-checkout machine for the hours the circulation desk was closed. However, due to the pandemic, we couldn't do the same level of in-person service, obviously. The library changed and the building itself changed its hours of availability. We were only going to be open limited hours for students who had reservations. We were going to try to provide some level of circulation desk assistance during business hours, Monday through Friday. We were going to be limited to the amount of staff we could have in the building, and try to stagger the hours of our staff due to health and safety concerns. And we weren't going to have any students or intern employees. And we were going to close our stacks. So everything would have to go through hold requests if folks wanted to pick up physical materials. So the question became over the summer, how are we going to provide circulation desk assistance safely with our limited staff in the building? And we wanted to try to figure out our options of assistance at a distance. So we looked into email. We thought email wasn't great for a couple of different reasons. It's much too slow. It was too impersonal, and we didn't want to put that level of work on the patron of having to find the right email address, email us, wait on a response. We looked into phone options as well. That was going to be really technically challenging because we're going to have a number of different staff members monitoring the circulation desk at any given time. And so how do we have one phone number that could be forwarded to different numbers easily and change it based on who is staffing it? And we didn't want to give out any personal phone numbers either. So phone assistance was going to be difficult. Also, again, too much work on the patron. We didn't want the patron to have to call. So we were leaning towards video, which would be great on the patrons if we could have a video circulation desk assistance where you could see a face. You walk into the library, you go to the circulation desk and you see a face, you walk up and you're able to talk to it. It's just on an iPad or some other device as opposed to a physical person. It also seemed logistically and technically a little bit easier if we could set up something where all of our different staff members could call into that video conferencing system, depending on when they were staffing the circulation desk. So we wanted to go with video. And so the next question was, how do we get that set up? We have hardware and software issues. The hardware question was easier than the software question for us because, like I mentioned earlier, we already had an iPad that we used for our self-checkout. So we figured because our stacks were closed, we could repurpose that iPad for our video virtual circulation desk assistants. Software was going to be trickier. We looked into some specialized software designed for kiosk kind of assistance. We weren't able to find anything that we found satisfactory. Also, all of those systems cost money. And as I'm sure all of us have experienced during the pandemic, there was some belt tightening on the budget side. So anything that was going to cost money was going to be a difficult sell. So we looked at our video conferencing systems that we already had, including Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And we decided that Zoom would probably be the best option for us for a number of reasons. All of our staff was already familiar with it, as I'm sure we are all way too familiar with Zoom at this point in our lives. And it didn't have any additional cost for us. So because of the familiarity and the cost issue, we decided to use Zoom for our virtual circulation desk. So from a technical aspect, we had to take a number of steps to set it up. We created a Zoom account for the virtual circulation desk iPad. So it's got its own separate Zoom account. And then I created a recurring Zoom meeting and invited all of the staff members who are going to be monitoring our virtual circulation desk at any given time and the Zoom account for the iPad. I made all of the participating staff members of meeting co-hosts so they could start the meetings, they could end the meetings, they can change the meetings, they can do what they need to do inside the actual Zoom. And then during the day, the iPad is set up in kiosk mode, which if you don't know what that is, it's a way to prevent users from accessing any other apps or programs while the iPad is open. So to change out of Zoom, you have to have the password. So patrons can't, go fiddle with our virtual circulation desk iPad. So our workflow every day, we staff it from Monday through Friday on weekdays from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's actually a new, we actually just recently changed that. It was until 6 p.m., but we went to 5 p.m. So at 8:30 every morning, somebody who is physically in the office starts the virtual circulation meeting on the iPad in the library. So we have to have somebody physically present in the library to start that meeting. And then, I am so sorry, I'm having video problems. And then each participating staff member joins the meeting during their assigned time of coverage. We set up a daily schedule, and whenever it's your assigned time to monitor virtual circ, you join the meeting, and whoever was there before leaves. And then at 5, the last staff member will just end the meeting. And then the iPad will stay in that kiosk mode until the next day when the staff member will restart the meeting. And this is what it looks like in practice when you're in the library. So you walk up to the iPad and then you see that helpful face. Just like with a Zoom meeting, you'll see yourself, that you can kind of see me in that bottom right-hand corner taking the picture. You'll also see the masking tape around the edges of our holder there. That's because that had the instructions for the self-checkout machine. And they were applied with decals that couldn't easily be removed. And so instead of removing them and having to replace them later, I just decided to cover it up because this was just going to be used temporarily, and we'll eventually go back to the using that for the self-checkout machine. So not ideal, but that's why that masking tape is there. So what are our results of this? We've gotten a lot less interaction than we expected early on from patrons. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is our library is just not being used all that much by students. Like I mentioned, it's reservation only. And I think that a lot of students didn't want to pay for a parking permit to come to campus to study. And the daily and hourly parking rates are still pretty exorbitant at Duke. So the administration, the law school parking lot is now actually open on evenings and weekends for free for students to come. And so there are more students in the building during those times. But again, we're only doing staffing during business hours because of our staff availability. So we're not getting that traction there. I would say that we tend to have one interaction per day. And that's about it with a patron. So not really interacting with a lot of patrons. Zoom updates can cause problems. So whenever there's any sort of Zoom update, somebody has to go get into the iPad in the building and update it, make sure everything is up to date. That can be a little bit tricky. And then another problem that we have been running into is that patrons dislike overhearing the conversations, either whenever with the person on staffing virtual circ speaking to another patron, or what's been happening a lot is when there's staff changeover. So whenever somebody is working the morning shift and I come on to the lunch shift, you know, I haven't seen Tina in forever and I want to catch up. How's your granddaughter? How's the family? And just have a couple of minutes of chit chat on the Zoom meeting while we're changing over shifts. But when we do that, the entire library can hear that. So that's been causing, we've gotten a few patron complaints about that we've had to address, which makes it a little less it makes it a little less social. It was very nice being able to catch up with your coworkers in that way. But again, it was causing problems for the patrons. So what were the pros? I think the biggest one is that we're one of the only places in the law school building where students can get live, quote unquote, in-person help. I think that's been great to be able to provide that assistance. We end up getting a lot of questions that we can't answer, questions about printing, questions about, you know, technology, things like that, that are out of our jurisdiction, but we're able to point folks in the right direction. But I think we've earned some goodwill within other law school groups for being a place that patrons can get some level of in-person assistance. It also helps keep staff not able to come into the office productive. So it's something that we can all do from home. You know, it's really helpful to visually reconnect with our staff members and building employees. Whenever you see somebody in the office, you know, whenever I'm in the office, I always try to stop by and say hi to whoever's working virtual circ. It's really nice to be able to connect in that way. And it's also a really good way to know what's going on in the library. So there have been a couple of times where there have been issues that we've been able to address proactively because we've overheard something in the library or we've seen something in the library. So it's been really helpful to just visually see that. Cons, again, it's not used much. That's probably one of the major cons. It requires an extremely large amount of staff bandwidth. Again, we're staffing at 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And I think it would be, if it was used more, it would be easier to use up that amount of staff bandwidth. But because it's not used that much, it can still be a little tricky to have to deal with that. Again, the Zoom updates can cause problems. And I think one of the bigger cons too is, given our circulation desk setup, it can be difficult to find for patrons. So here's a picture. If you're about 10 feet away from the circulation desk walking in, it can be hard to find that iPad, right? You'll see it there kind of right in the middle. But if you don't know what you're really looking for, the iPad doesn't stand out enough to really to really make a difference. So, so a lot of times there are patrons just kind of walking by trying to find somebody, and we have to be like, hey, over here, down here, no, to your left, to your right, to try to get their attention. To actually see it, we put the Blue Devil standee behind it to try to get folks' attention, but that hasn't really helped too much either. So what lessons have we learned? One is to utilize existing technologies and resources. We put all this together for free, so we ended up not having to utilize any additional funds. Be flexible. You know, we went in with the business hours plan early on. I think it would be nicer if we didn't have to do all of that, given the lack of patron interactions that we have. but I think a little flexibility certainly helps out. And then we've also seen positive outcomes, even though the system isn't being widely used in its intended fashion all that much. So, you know, even if the intended use isn't, usage isn't high, you know, being able to have those interactions with our coworkers in the building, being able to see what's going on, having a sense for the library has been really helpful. And while we have questions, I actually am assigned to take over virtual circ at 3:30. So I was going to show everybody what it looks like from the user or from the staff side. But if you have any questions, were you promoting this service elsewhere? For example, at the point of reservation, asked Leanne. Yes, we were advertising it there, and we're also, we sent out some notices to students in our student emails, but I'm not sure how widely read those were. Stacks closed, does that mean you all did not circulate anything from your stacks at all this year? So we are circulating things from our stacks. It's just having to go through a hold process. So you have to put a hold on it. And actually you can see it here. Let me share my screen again. So if you look here to the left, you'll see those brown paper bags. Those are the contactless pickup. So our stacks are closed. Patrons have to put a hold request in for an item. One of the staff member pulls it, checks it out to the student, puts it in a brown paper bag, and we email the student letting them know they can come pick it up. So we are circulating items, just not face to face. And one of the reasons why we wanted the virtual assistance was to help out with that. Do you typically also provide reference service within your library? And was this in place or in addition to that service? We do provide reference, but our reference desk is a separate desk. And they're providing their assistance via email this year. So their service was all via email, and we've gotten a couple of requests for reference questions, and we've been able to refer them to the reference email address. Good questions, everybody.
James, there was one other that pointed out that patrons don't need to touch the screen and when they make a request.
Yes, patrons don't need to touch the screen, and that's been really helpful as well. So the only person who needs to touch the screen is the staff member who starts the meeting every day. And here, let me pull up. So another piece is that everybody who does virtual circ has another machine from which they do virtual circ. I don't know if this is going to show up very well, but I have this other laptop, and you can kind of see the library from here. No, Tina, I'm giving a presentation about virtual circ right now.
Hey, Tina.
Donna Nixon says hi.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
No. So yes, as you can see, that's an example of the crosstalk that is we've gotten a couple of complaints about. And then what was the main assistance request you all received? Honestly, the biggest question that we get is printing. Where do we go for printing help? My print job didn't print. Things like that. That's provided by a different department within our the law school. So we have to refer that out. But that's the biggest question that we get. And I think I'm out of time. So if you have any other questions, you can shoot me an email, james.britt@law.duke.edu. I'm happy to continue to talk about this.
Thank you both so much. These were both really great presentations. It's fascinating to see the work that we have all been doing in the past year. That's it for the conference for today. I really want to thank all the presenters and all the attendees, and I hope that you all go out and enjoy this beautiful day and the next few, and take care of yourselves. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.